Welcome back to Block TV. It's time now for Bird Talk, in which you talk crypto Twitter with Pierre Rochard, one of Bitcoin's fiercest advocates and a man who's been writing and advising about the crypto sphere since 2013. Every week, Pierre shares his insights on his favorite and least favorite tweets of the week and breaks down his reasons for his choice. So firstly, Pierre, thanks for being back on Block TV.
Thanks for having me on, Asher.
All right, so to kick us off this week, you've got a tweet coming from David Harding that talks about, I guess, the ongoing community elements, the use of developers in the Bitcoin core development network. Tell us what brought this to your attention and made it your favorite tweet for this week, Pierre.
Yeah, so first, I follow David Harding because he is a longtime Bitcoin technical writer. And so he is very clued in on what's going on in the Bitcoin development process and also communicates those developments, whether it was with his involvement with the Bitcoin.org website or with the Bitcoin OpTech newsletter in this case. And so the newsletter comes out every week. I highly recommend people who are interested in Bitcoin to subscribe to it, even if some of it goes over their heads because it's a little bit technical. I think that it's important to stay informed. And in this case, there's actually an initiative to start reviewing the upcoming soft fork. So what a soft fork is essentially an upgrade to the Bitcoin protocol. Now, I call it an upgrade because I'm biased. I like this soft fork. But if it were a bad soft fork, maybe I would call it an attack on Bitcoin's protocol. In any case, this Taproot proposal is up for review. So if people know how to code or they understand how to read programming logic or are familiar with cryptography, then I think that it's incumbent upon them to review this proposal. Whether they do it because they own Bitcoin and they want to secure their investment, or they do it out of intellectual curiosity. And I think this highlights a huge advantage of open source that is anyone can participate, anyone can contribute, anyone can review. And that is in stark difference to the existing legacy fiat monetary system, where you have to be a credentialed MIT PhD in order to be able to have any say about anything about how the fiat monetary system works. And so I think that people should really hone in on the fact that Bitcoin allows them to participate, and they should educate themselves so that they're able to meaningfully contribute.
So, I mean, as well, tweets like this and the sort of conversation we're having now, I suppose, to me, smacks of the fact that, particularly in a developer sense, Bitcoin is still incredibly community driven. While we have speculators coming in from all sides, it's now Bitcoin has entered the larger scale political conversation, particularly there in the United States. When it comes to the actual core development of the Bitcoin network, upgrades, attacks, or however you want to particularly label any particular change in the network, it still comes from a very tight-knit core community. Can you speak to that point for us a little bit there, Pierre?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think that it highlights an issue where there's kind of a cultural gap between the new entrants that are perhaps financial institutions or they are Silicon Valley startups, and they don't really want to or are not interested in contributing to open source. And so that creates a gap where they are very out of touch with what's going on in the open source ecosystem. And so then they end up being surprised when there are changes to the Bitcoin protocol rather than being active participants in them and being driving forces behind them. And so to have this change, what we need to see is Bitcoin or companies that rely on the open source protocols, whether it's Bitcoin or other ones, to actually invest in them. And the best example of this right now is Square Crypto. So Jack Dorsey, who is the CEO of both a giant multinational called Square and of Twitter, has created a developer team called Square Crypto that is focused entirely on open source contributions to these underlying protocols without concern about the commercial interests of Square. And so that gives them a tremendous amount of freedom to be able to pursue what they think from an engineering perspective is in the best interests of Bitcoin. And then through Adam Smith's invisible hand, Square and Cash App, especially since they have the Bitcoin feature today, will benefit from those upgrades over the coming years. It just takes a very long-term visionary.
Certainly, a long-term visionary. And as you said, the means and desire to participate become critical in this sort of work, which I suppose segues us neatly into your least favorite tweet for this week. This one coming from the New York Times, speaking about the rash of protests that have broken out across the world, popular protests that have broken out across the world, a number of different countries. Now, Pierre, I want to know what brought this tweet to your attention and why do you label it as your least favorite tweet for this week?
Yeah, I guess the first reason it's my least favorite is because it came from the New York Times. This is an outfit that has, in the past, they claimed that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, so they kind of have a checkered history in terms of their fact checking, and they've also have a gentleman on their opinion page named Paul Krugman, who is a notorious no-coiner USD shill. And by defending the status quo and defending the inflationary fiat fractional reserve banking system, Paul Krugman is part of the problem. And so he is part of the reason why we're seeing these problems abroad that are coming from inflation. And it really is about people's purchasing power and the price hikes that are happening. Now, who is benefiting from that inflation is kind of the next question. Well, the way it works is that it is the crony banking system that is highly intertwined with the political system in these countries. And essentially, they've created a fiat plutocracy that is able to extract resources from these economic systems through seigniorage. That is the printing of new money. And so they are the first beneficiaries of the seigniorage. And then everyone else is on the receiving end of the inflation, and they see their standard of living declining. And so that's why they're out in the streets and protesting this corruption that really is only possible because of the fiat money printing system that is enabling it. If they were on the Bitcoin standard, these political elites would not be able to create more Bitcoin, right? They would have to face the fact that the people run Bitcoin full nodes and are thus able to make sure that they're not getting scammed by their government.
Now, you've spoken in the past and on Twitter, notably, saying that the greatest form of protest one can take up is stacking sats. Can you talk a little bit to that policy as a form of protest, particularly in the context of these popular uprisings?
Yeah, so I kind of think of it from the historical perspective of how has change actually happened. And one avenue is violent revolution, and so we saw that with in the United States, the American Revolution, and so arguably that had good results. The problem is that it's not universally applicable. So then, when the French tried doing a violent revolution, the end result was arguably worse than what they started out with. And so that's where I think that peaceful protest is also very important in terms of, what Gandhi did in India and kind of the nonviolent movement. But really what ends up being most effective is boycotts. And so if we boycott the fiat monetary system by adopting Bitcoin, then that ultimately would drive far more change, both in the immediate term of, well, now you no longer have to deal with the fiat system, so you're doing a lot better just from day zero. But also at scale, eventually, if too many people are doing this, then the fiat system ultimately does self-destruct, and the people left holding the bag are the corrupt politicians and their corrupt banking cronies and the central bankers who ultimately didn't really deserve the wealth that they had extracted from these countries. So yeah, I think stacking sats is actually a highly effective way of opting out. And I kind of liken it to civil disobedience, right? So it's the idea that, if we do something that the government doesn't like, and if enough of us do it, then the government can't really act against it. Otherwise, they've got a bigger problem on their hands. And historically, that's been extremely effective. So it's just a matter of getting a critical mass of people participating. I'd argue we're already there if you kind of look at just what's been happening in Bitcoin over the past 10 years. So as long as adoption just continues like this, we'll continue seeing a huge amount of pressure on governments to cease with the inflation.
All right, Pierre Rochard breaking down the use of Bitcoin as a tool for political action, protest, and taking on the current system. I look forward to seeing how that progresses over the days, weeks, months, and years ahead of Bitcoin's future. Pierre, I want to thank you so much for joining us on BLOCKTV, and stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter